I have to tell you, I have been looking at the handout that Senator Collins had presented in terms of the numbers that we have seen over the years since 2009 and the very dramatic rise beginning in 2012. And I come back to the fact, as the chairman has noted, that we are here today, you are here today, presenting this as an emergency supplemental. This is a crisis. This is a humanitarian crisis, and I think this pulls at the heartstrings of all of us as we recognize that these statistics, these are not numbers, these are lives, and these are children's lives. But I find it just very difficult and very troubling to think that we are just now trying to get our hands around this. And we've seen these numbers grow from 24,000 in 12 to 38,000 in 13 to 52,000 in 14, and actually now 57,000. And so I'm frustrated and I'm concerned, as I'm sure that all of you are, but I just can't understand why we have not had you before us prior to this time. Why it is now part of an emergency supplemental request, and to hear the testimony from both secretaries about the very immediate need to act before August, or the consequences in terms of how these children will be cared for when they are here in this country, are quite dire, as you have stated. And so, Secretary Johnson, you have said that doing nothing is not an option. And you've outlined some of the things that you have done within your department to reduce the transfer time, some additional detention facilities being built. But it certainly is not translating in terms of what we're seeing in the numbers coming. And so the proposal that what we do is we build out more permanent detention facilities, more permanent beds, because somehow or other those are less expensive than temporary facilities. I want to believe you, Secretary Johnson, and Secretary Burwell, you've all said we need to stem the tide. Well, if we all want to stem the tide, and that's what we're trying to drill down on now, is how do we reduce these numbers? How do we reduce these bar charts that are real life children? And if we are successful in what we're doing, we're now going to have detention facilities that we have put in places in New Mexico and around the southern border that we needed to gear up quite dramatically so. And if you do what you're hoping, and we fund what you're hoping for, we have now in place facilities that would seemingly no longer be necessary if we have done what we all hoped we would do before this became a crisis. So I'm trying to reconcile what is being asked for here in this emergency supplemental. And as much as I can lament about we shouldn't be where we are where we are. And that's a shame. But I guess my question to you, Ms. Burwell, is do we truly understand what the strategy and the plan is going forward beyond August? We haven't seen legislation from the administration. We're making the assumption that the numbers are going to continue to grow, and that's why we're going to need the requests that you have within your budget. But if we're doing what we're all talking about doing, which is to reduce the times and to have a process that is better expedited, Is this the right answer?
So I think there are two things, and one is at the beginning of your comments with regard to the numbers. The chart that Senator Collins handed out, I think an important thing we need to distinguish is it includes the Mexican numbers. Because there is a different process and procedure for the Mexican numbers, almost the vast majority of those never come because those are returned.
But in fairness, those Mexico numbers are actually going down.
Right. If we take those numbers out and then we look at the actual numbers that we have received as unaccompanied children, from the year 2011 to 2013, 6,500 to 13,600. That's a 108% increase. The increase from 12 to 13 was about to 25,000. That's an 81% increase. If you take, let's just say we all thought at a minimum it'd be a 90% increase. Let's just take the average of the 2 years of increases, and we're working off a higher base. So anytime you're going to say there's a 100% increase off of 24,000, you're estimating something big. What this Congress and the administration funded in the FY14 appropriations was enough money for 54,000. The transfer, secretarial transfer that the secretary before me did was 44 million. That got us to a place where we would have had 60,000. So last year we had about 25,000. We had planned for 60,000. That was a worst case scenario. That was far greater than the increases we had seen in percentage terms off of a larger base. What we are seeing now is numbers, as has been reflected in everyone's comments, that are far beyond. So the planning element, I think, in terms of the question of why we were here. With regard to your second question, which I think is a very fair one, it is related to how we make sure we stay in front. We are extremely hopeful that you are correct, that the plan we're putting in place will not lead to the numbers.
I think we have to have more than just a hope for a policy.
And part of what we have asked for in the supplemental is the ability to have transfer authority. If the needs aren't there, and we are trying to plan ahead so we don't have the backup at the border, and if the needs are not there, we are, HHS, as the Secretary mentioned in his opening comments, we are very willing and happy to transfer any funds that are not needed to the other departments to increase. The transfer would occur to any of the departments, most likely to DHS, but could occur to any. And we think that's an important part of trying to balance the planning ahead with what you are rightfully pointing to. We need these numbers to come down. And so we are trying to balance that need for what you said in your earlier comments. Did you not plan for the worst? Making sure that we do that, at the same time create a space for the success we hope we have.
Thank you,